Hello. Um, I'd like to talk on two lectures. This is the first one that I'd like to discuss as part of the class. Um, it's basically the chapter that covers ethics and intellectual freedom, and I'm going to talk about intellectual freedom and censorship in regards to that chapter. Um, Intellectual freedom and censorship are two halves of the same coin. Um, They're a little bit different, and yet they're similar. So let me talk about intellectual freedom and the aspects of intellectual freedom that I would like to present in the class. So let's get started. Well, first of all, we'll talk a little bit about ethics. It's also part of intellectual freedom. That is, the first thing I'd like to mention in regards to intellectual freedom is specifically the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom. There is also intellectual freedom that is part of IFLA, the International Federation of Library and Information Science, but I will, in this particular talk, I'm going to talk about the Office of Intellectual Freedom as part of the American Library Association. It began at the American Library Association in 1967. It was first started by a librarian by the name of Judith Krug. It's easy to find information about Judith Krug. You could just simply do a Google on her. She passed away in 2009, but she is well known for her activities that started all the aspects of intellectual freedom. Primarily the American Library Association documents that you can find in a publication that is available. If you look at the library, you'll find actual full copies of it. You can purchase it, called the Intellectual Freedom Manual. But if you go to your library site, you're going to find full text copies of the Intellectual Freedom Manual at the library. In the Intellectual Freedom Manual, it has copies of the various documents that are important to libraries. That is, the Library Bill of Rights, the freedom to read, the freedom to view. All these documents are found within the manual and also independently, if you just go to the American Library Association. Now, the Library Bill of Rights is actually quite old. It was first written in 1939 and has been updated many times since then. The freedom to read and the freedom to view are relatively newer documents. Judith Krug is actually famous for creating what she called the Banned Books Week, which is always the last week in September. If you go to the American Library Association, of course, you can find lists of banned books. And you can generally find banned books based on the topic of the banned book. In other words, is it a banned book because of sex, or is it a banned book because of magic, etc. There's a lot of different categories in which books have been banned. Frequently, I will reference an article in the discussion board that you might find of interest. I'll post it in the discussion early on so that everybody has a chance to read it before they look at other things in the discussions. It might actually raise some interesting discussions in itself. Other than that, what you need to realize is that intellectual freedom is the ability to for everyone to be able to view, read, etc., anything that they wish. It doesn't say that you have to read something, but you have the ability to read it if you wish. And that is important because it's saying that everyone has the freedom to read, not just what some person wants you to read. Again, as I said, the Banned Books Week, last week in September. It's the last full week in September, actually. Sometimes it goes into October. That is a very interesting thing to take a look at by going to the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom. Now, there are various challenges that do occur in libraries. We talked about the freedom to read, but then there are challenges. You will get libraries have gotten challenges on books, etc., but they've actually gotten challenges on the programs that they present. For example, there's been a whole host of readings in libraries of current years related to topics that people consider hard to handle. Another one is displays. The library might do a display that somebody has a complaint about. Now, when there's challenges actually to the library, you will get challenges from patrons who have actually read the book and disagreed with it, and you'll have patrons who have not read the book but are merely complaining about the topic of the book. Both have occurred. One of the things that a library can do to handle methods of complaint, for example, is the collection development policy. Considering in the collection development policy issues related to challenges. We can discuss this a little bit further when we talk about collection development policies, but remember, a collection development policy should have in the document something about any challenges to what the library is doing. Now, another thing that needs to be concerned, and not specifically in challenges, but in that sense, there has been a variety of Internet Protection Acts that occurred primarily under the Bill Clinton administration that were written. Some were deemed or stopped by the courts. That is, like, for example, the CDA, Communications Decency Act, which was written in 1996 and was stopped by the court as being incorrect, shall we say. And then there was COPPA, the Children's Online Protection Act, 1998, which was actually deemed to be unconstitutional by the courts. There was COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, 1998. That too was not used as heavily as the current accepted one, accepted being that it's in action right now. That was called CIPA, Children's Internet Protection Act, 2002. Now, there are differences in that. CIPA only affects public libraries and school libraries, does not affect university or college libraries, because colleges and universities tend to have individuals who are adults, even if they're 18 or up. CIPA is for under the age of 18. What the federal government can do is if a library doesn't prove that they acknowledge how CIPA is handled, they can not provide E-rates. E-rates are electronic rates provided by the federal government to help libraries with internet connection rates and phone connection rates. In other words, it provides a discount to the library. Library must provide documentation that shows that they're utilizing certain acts, and they have to file for E-rates. a fairly lengthy document. Some libraries follow SEPA, but do not necessarily go for E-rates. It depends on the library. In some states, like Michigan, there is SEPA, that is a state program, not necessarily. It's an enhancement of the federal program, and what it does is it has greater implications for not following SEPA. In other words, while the federal government can only handle E-rates, some of the states that have SEPAs of their own put various punishments in place that financial or otherwise that makes the library follow SEPA. Now, there have been individuals who have been concerned about SEPA, particularly Judith Krug went to the Supreme Court to talk about SEPA. That is information that is blocked by filters. Now, the way SEPA operates is an adult can have it turned off. They can get into a full internet and they can request a full internet. But for computers that are used by minors or even other computers, they have to block the computer by the use of a filter. Now, filters can be internal, run by the library, or they can be external, filters that are supplied by a company for the library. Some libraries filter all the computers, but have a methodology with the filter that allows an adult to unblock the filter. With those programs, because they're not held by the library, they're difficult to unblock sites that could be used by minors, particularly information related to sexuality or medical information that are going to be blocked by the filter. We had a case in a library that I ran where the filter blocked a student trying to get to a high school that is local called Sexton. And it was blocked because it had the word SEX in Sexton. Fortunately, my library had an internal filter, a filter that can be controlled by us. And so as soon as we were informed by the student that Sexton was being blocked by our filter, we could go in immediately and unblock Sexton so that the student could get to the school's website. But if the filter had been purchased and used externally, like some libraries, we could request that Sexton be unblocked, but it couldn't be done immediately. It would probably take a day or two. So this is a concern about filters. Now, the advantage of some filters is that you can filter all the computers and allow adults to unblock the filter. Generally, those are filters that are by external companies. So that is a concern. As I may have mentioned, if I didn't, Judith Krug went to the Supreme Court and argued against SEPA because of the problems with filters. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this little discussion.